how we perceive reality changes. Therefore, all of our perception, our perceptual organs must also shift accordingly to match our environment. Now, our environment isn't necessarily what's outside of us, it's what's going on inside of us as well. Our home that we live in, our environment. And so if I go back and read this, the organ, so the otolith, is what allows us to perceive linear acceleration, speeding up of time, which is what I just said. And I just looked this up, by the way, so this is just fun for me. Both horizontally and vertically. So there's the cross that I always see, and gravity, which I don't quite understand. But I encourage you to look up Dan Winters and all of his information on gravity. Essentially, I think the way that he explains it, I should know because I've listened to his things so many times, but I can't explain it like he does. It's a spin, right? So our rate of spin, from my perspective, has increased, has accelerated. And I talk a lot about linearity. So how we view things, our linear point A to point B, has also accelerated. So wouldn't it make sense that ironically the organ in our body that gives us the ability to perceive linear acceleration is also shifting in order to accommodate how we perceive time, how we perceive linearity, how we perceive the acceleration of our reality? So there's my woo-woo definition of what's going on. And it also is shifting to support us, right? I'm hearing enhanced mobility, give us the ability to move faster, the ability to move with this enhancement. So it's an upgrade from my perspective. And I always have said in previous times, when we go through these ascension symptoms, I get asked so often, when is this going to stop? When is this going to go back to normal? Or I get told, people share with me, people share with me that apparently I'm going backwards in time to my second grade English composition. Anyways, but people share with me all the time that they're not comfortable with this. They're tired of it. It's frustrating. I have been referring to it as growing pains, and I will continue to refer to it as growing pains. So our relationship is changing with all of this, therefore, what's happening in our body. And I say relationship, and I hear our ship, our body, right? Our vessel is shifting in order to help us perceive this acceleration. And I think it's important to kind of talk about what acceleration means. So I'm just going to go into that. Ooh, this is fun. Shall we play? Let's go into a little synchronicity because this is how I like to roll. So hang on. So I'm going to share screen briefly. And I'm on Wikipedia, which I love to use. So I don't follow traditionally. I just go where I'm guided to go to give me the answers that I'm looking for through synchronicity. So I was called to talk about acceleration. So let me just go back briefly. Here we are on otolith, and I hope that's big enough. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Maybe that'll be better. That is as big as it gets, I guess. So it talks about these organs are what allows an organism, including humans, to perceive linear acceleration both horizontally and vertically. And I clicked on acceleration. So here we are with the 8-ball, which I find is very ironic because I was talking about rolling, right? How I roll. This is a ball falling under gravity. It gets faster, it looks like, as it falls. Its rate of acceleration, it speeds up. I think there's something very symbolic about that 8 there, but I'll come back to that. Hearing black ball. Ooh. Whew. Okay. In mechanics, acceleration is the rate of change of the velocity of an object with respect to time. So ironically, I wasn't talking about necessarily, it doesn't matter. So the orientation of an object's acceleration is given by the orientation of the net force acting on that object. Now I'm going to stop there just for a moment because let's think about what's been going on. Doesn't it feel like a lot of us are under pressure? Doesn't it feel like there's a lot of force going on right now? And what is the force? May the force be with you. In physics, a force is an influence that can cause an object to change its velocity, to accelerate unless counterbalanced by other forces. So I find that also very symbolic. So the net balance of all external forces, and what's the velocity? Velocity is the speed and the direction of motion of an object. Now let's just get a little woo-woo for a moment here, which we're already doing, but so we're having a push and a pull on us. We've got magnetism, we've got electricity, stimuli going on all around us that are enhancing our perception, our perspective on our linear experience, aka our inner ear crystals. And so what's happening is this is shifting our direction. So woo-woo, or from an esoteric, if I'm looking at this as a symbology, right, or an analogy, or all of the above, it is so symbolic because we feel off balance. It's ironic. We don't feel like we're in control. We can't stay, we're all over the place. We're dizzy. Things are spinning out of control. We're resetting our system so that we can move accordingly to the new timeline, the new trajectory, the new direction of force that we are all creating as creator beings. I also wanted to add that according to an article, was saying something about the fact that we have 1,000 crystals. They're tiny, like tiny little hairs, but there's something like our inner ear. Each one of our ears holds about 1,000 crystals on average. Isn't that crazy? I found that very interesting. All right. Okay. So I actually really want to go down this rabbit hole, which reminds me of the 3 ears and the rabbits and the infinity loop, but I'm going to do, I think, a part 2 and just do that because it's a little separate. Also, before I forget, one important thing, craniosacral therapy. So I always recommend craniosacral therapy for everything, but I can see it really helping somebody who has vertigo. Now, if you're ultra sensitive, I've had some people say it's a little too nervy for them, or it's a little too, makes them too sensitive. There is that potential too. So if you're heightened sensitive to everything, I love craniosacral. For me, it's my go-to. And it helps with my vertigo. In the past, it has, we'll put it that way. So that's an option as well. And to see what happens. Now, of course, again, this isn't medical advice. You have to decide what's best for you. For me, it worked. For some people, they may need to actually go to a doctor and physically have some things worked on. Okay, I'm gonna go into a little flow, and then I'm gonna do a part 2 of this particular video. So I'm just gonna go into and drop in this particular part of the video and kind of see what comes through in relationship to the conversation that we're having. We may get into earth changes, or I may do that in a second video. So just a little disclaimer there. And this is meant to be felt, not necessarily understood. I might have some light language that comes through to help people with vertigo. In fact, I think I am going to do that in a separate video. So as our consciousness grows, as we expand our vibratory frequency, things in our body may start to vibrate at a different speed, which creates disorganization. Things fall off the wagon, if you will. I'm seeing a wagon and the wheel falls off. Shake till the wheels fall off. So what happens is the body has to reset its inner balance and therefore its inner spectrum. And so a lot of this is a play on words, you guys, and I will do a part 2. So the way the body sits within this field of disorganization is important because many of us are feeling the field reorganizing itself. And that's a play on words, the organs, right? This piano and organ, but also I'm hearing the organs in the body are transmitting a signal that is then amplified, and therefore also the sound that is outside of us is amplifying the sound inside the body. So there is this inner tone essentially that is creating a spin, as suggested earlier, a spindle, a spindrift, and many of us can feel cut adrift as we float through this particle exchange, this particular activity of information and energetic exchange. And the electrical signaling is then stimulated and over enhanced as we create a new way of hearing self-organization. The body then begins to organize itself in a new harmonic and pattern of intonation, and it allows the different tones to be perceived in the inner ears, or points or seeds of recognition that actually allow us to communicate in a different frequency. We can hear more. I'm being called to stop and remind everybody that noise sensitivity is also something that many of us have been experiencing. So in addition to this, many of us are feeling ear sensitivity, inner ear sensitivity. And this creates a new way of interpreting our environment. It creates a new way of interpreting the sounds and the signals that our environment is sounding out, that is sounding out to us. And we are then able to hear things. I'm hearing with ears to hear. We allow for our accessibility to be enhanced. And while it may feel uncomfortable and disrupted and at times distorted, we also may recognize that our vision or our version of what we are perceiving feels distorted. Our view of the world, perhaps, for we are learning how to hear with new ears. We're learning how to recognize the harmony within the disharmony. We are learning how to hear the chords of music underneath the chords of countless freakishly uncensored noise patterns. Now, the earth is also shifting her own inner ears, one might say. The inner crystals of calcium carbonate, that which was the carbon, is also changing its frequency. And this is a plan word, so I'm being called to pause just for a moment. So we're going from carbon to crystalline. So even though our inner ears are crystal, there are a certain type of crystal, from what I'm seeing intuitively, that is changing. It's evolving. It's shifting its pattern. So when a crystal evolves, let's say it goes from quartz to, and it becomes, or it moves into, I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, but I'm just going to tell you what I'm seeing. It changes, what I'm hearing is the rhombic, the structure. So it actually, I'm seeing it gains a cell. It gains a nodule. It gains a node, if you will. So it changes the actual structure of the ingredients, is the easiest way to say it. And so as the earth shifts within her own core, within her own syntax, plan words, the syntactual plan words again, I'm seeing lots of things. So let me see if I can play with this. I'm literally seeing like jacks. And if you look up the shape, okay, so I'm being called to share that. And so what is happening from one perspective is our orientation, or how we recognize patterns, is shifting. And therefore, I'm hearing the gravity of the situation is stabilizing, and we're working on that. That's a play on words. So the gravity, and in addition to what we're seeing outside of us, so it's play on words, gravity literally, and how much is going on of our environment. So we are working on stationing ourselves inside of this particular syntax. And we'll come back to this later. So as we grow together with the earth, as we grow together with humans, we find that our listening patterns are going through a series of readjustments. And the inner earth, or the inner earth, is also going through a series of adjustments. For her crystals are in the process of shifting as well. I'm literally seeing a crystal move from one area and shift to another area. Certain crystals are being reformed, certain crystals are being carried to other areas of the Earth's inner structure, inner earth. So this creates a pattern and a shift in the weight, if you want to call it that, of how the Earth sits or how the Earth spins. And this is subtle. So as we think of all of the ears that are inside of or all the crystals that are inside of the inner ear, imagine all of the crystals that are inside of the inner earth. Imagine a quartz crystal shifting or managing your clock, running your clock. Imagine all of I'm seeing a clock speeding up because of the quartz crystal has shifted in its vibratory speed. So everything is being enhanced or accelerated, as spoken earlier, as seen earlier. And so as these crystals shift their frequency, so too does our body recalibrate in order to support this shift in frequency. And so we may call this an upgrade. And I'm seeing a gradient, like a line. And I'm seeing that as a reference to a linear line, a linear acceleration. So it's almost as if we are speeding uphill from one perspective. So our movement patterns are redirecting us to shapeshift accordingly. And so we are moving with the earth, as of course we must do, as we are part of her, intrinsically connected in our body mind from one perspective, and physically in many more ways than we realize. The Earth's core is shifting her frequency as well. And while some may believe that it is a molten place of dripping lava, we would also say that there are certain crystals that are inside of the core that do not melt. They are permanently part of her structure. And just as if we have the inner ear crystals that are very difficult to see, I'm seeing the tiny hairs. Earth also has these types of crystals within her crust from one perspective. And so while they do not dissolve, they do move. And so with the movements comes a shift in the sound and the vibration, or how the sound is magnified in her vascular system. I'm seeing tubes, and I'm seeing the inner tubes of the ears. And I'm seeing spinning. There's like this spinning going on. And this cleans out the debris, one might say, and it reorganizes the patterns so that multiple types of elements can now come together and intertwine. Play on words, one might say. For in this crystal twining, it actually activates a new template. It activates a new template or form that we may then fill out into, that we may be in formation of. We are constantly in formation. We are moving and shifting our form. And as we do this, more information pours in that we are then able to hear, utilize, download, understand. And so this is a very basic description of what is happening in linearity from one perspective. And this is a moment in time, one might say, that is enhancing our innate ability to transcribe or to understand the inscription that is transcribed on our inscription. So I'm hearing DNA. It gives us the ability to clarify and understand with more clarity what is transcribed or what we are seeing. And this is all play on words. I'm seeing it has to do with signaling, communication. It has to do with our, I'm just seeing cones, like our cones are getting bigger. That also has to do with our eyesight as well. So as these crystals reactivate, for many of them have not been humming. Many of them have been turned off, so to speak. For if you do not listen, you lose the ability to hear, one might say, and this is an analogy. For it has been kept within so deeply, or these sounds have never been heard before, because the actual formation has never been formed. So we could say that the formation has been there the whole time, yet it was shut down and is now reopening. Or we could say that the crystals have created a new pattern, and within this pattern, there are new forms being heard. And so there are new messages, there are new notes, there are new wave patterns. And so as the earth moves to accompany the wave patterns, I'm hearing scalar technology, it must also adapt and change its own currency in order to optimize its potential. And this also is a reflection of our human patterning. And so we are invited to listen. We are invited to take a breath and give ourselves the opportunity to expand our breath and allow ourselves to slow down. For in this passage of time, much is being written, much is being rewritten, and much is being discovered. For this is a great moment of reorganization and recognition, and the willingness to come into a place of order from disorder is very important. For if we can find that place, the sequencing or the chapters that are unfolding in the next series of events that are playing out will play out with much more sparkle, will play out with much more reverence for the sound behind the sound. This is kind of a joke from my guidance team to me. Sometimes when I tone, I can hear, I guess it's an overtone or an undertone. And I call it the sound behind the sound. I didn't know it was there. And all of a sudden I hit a certain note and I'm like, what is that? I don't even know where it's coming from. Is that coming from me? I call it the sound behind the sound. I also refer to the sound of the silence, what that's coming out of as the sound behind the sound. Also, if I'm tuning into a client or a friend, or I'm really listening in that space, I don't necessarily hear the question that's being asked. I hear more about why that question is being asked, or I call that the sound behind the sound, or I see pictures as to where that's coming from. So we are inviting all who are listening to find their own pace. For even though much is speeding up, we are the ones that are ultimately in control of how we respond to the speed or the aperture, play on words, of how quickly we are opening. Like the blossom on a flower or a tree, as we branch out and find more of ourselves, as we find more of ourselves, we begin to unroll and unwrap from a particular signature or sound template that we could say is being restored, or we could say is bringing in a new resonance and a new harmony that will be woven into the fabric of reality, the reality that we, all of us, you and me, are co-creating together. So if we can move away from our own distortions, and we can move with the simplicity of a beautiful syntax of terminology. I can see this, by the way, this is points on crystals, terminology, termination of a crystal. It'll allow us to determine the flow and the signal in which the sound is coming from. So again, leaning into the heart, leaning into the sound of love and appreciation and compassion and gratitude only enhances this particular moment in time and gives us greater accessibility to this inner frequency, this inner pattern, and we begin to recognize the distortions, and we begin to hear the signature. We begin to see what we are signing on to and what we are signing off from. And this gives us the opportunity to create our own new signature, to utilize our own ability to co-create in harmony. And this may seem a very simplistic message, yet it is holding many different patterns within the language or the syntax or the format of how this is spoken. We are slowing it down a bit so that it may be felt, so that those who are listening can feel behind, underneath, through the words that are being utilized and are being heard through the hairs within the body that then send a signal or a tone or a sound through the organ of the structure of the lattice work of the bones of the skeleton that allow for a communication to occur, that allow for the channel connection through the channels, the canals, the arteries, the blood vessels, all that we are encased within. And in case you missed it, listen again. For as we listen to the sound of this next chapter, we begin to create a beautiful book, a beautiful collaboration that we are narrating in our now moments, that we are co-creating and sending out together in this reality. For we are creating a new chapter, a new reality, a new wordology, a new way of communicating with one another. And we are enhancing our package, one might say. And as we allow our enhancements to create a beautiful wave of listening, we begin to listen with more. We begin to fine tune. I'm seeing fine hairs. We begin to fine tune how we listen and therefore how we respond to what we are listening to and through. For this format that we are part of, that we are encased within, and I'm being shown, yes, the body we're encased within, but we're also encased within this plasma, this wave, the waves that are all around us. This then responds to us and creates a more, I'm just seeing colorful way of communication, a way of interpreting, a way of feeling. We begin to listen with our hearts. We listen with our inner ears. We see with eyes to see, and we utilize all of our organs rather than just one part of our organ. And I'm seeing again this piano. You're not just using one key. We're not just using one tone. We're not just using one song. We're not just using one particular timing. We're utilizing all of it. Okay, so I'm going to end on that note, and I will go down the rabbit hole a little bit more, and I hope someone found this helpful out there or fun to play with. In love and light, namaste.